driven
Oh,
this career?
God. Well, like I say, you can tell by the bags under the eyes, I'm ancient. I left high school in '85, did my HSC in '85, travelled a little bit and uh, put aside a uni course, ironically in journalism, and came back and found myself in the middle of the home entertainment boom in '85. So I moved straight into a role in the what's called the display department. We used to put the displays in video store windows. So I just spent my whole day dealing with movies there after having done that in high school as well. So yeah, it's always been an obsession of mine. And I was fortunate enough to go, like, literally spend 12 years, I guess, in that, right through the booming VHS years, which was just madness. There was money floating around everywhere, and the enormous amount of waste that went on back then in the 80s and 90s. I always look back at that period and that technology of the VCR and the VHS and Betamax tapes, and the birth and then the death of the video store is just one of the most extraordinary periods in the entertainment industry.
So hey, look, let's get back to you. So like winding the clock back, uh, have you been someone who loved TV and movies from the get go? Like what's driven
Oh,
this career?
God. Well, like I say, you can tell by the bags under the eyes, I'm ancient. I left high school in '85, did my HSC in '85, travelled a little bit and uh, put aside a uni course, ironically in journalism, and came back and found myself in the middle of the home entertainment boom in '85. So I moved straight into a role in the what's called the display department. We used to put the displays in video store windows. So I just spent my whole day dealing with movies there after having done that in high school as well. So yeah, it's always been an obsession of mine. And I was fortunate enough to go, like, literally spend 12 years, I guess, in that, right through the booming VHS years, which was just madness. There was money floating around everywhere, and the enormous amount of waste that went on back then in the 80s and 90s. I always look back at that period and that technology of the VCR and the VHS and Betamax tapes, and the birth and then the death of the video store is just one of the most extraordinary periods in the entertainment industry. There hasn't been you know, even when you look at records or cassettes or anything like that, nothing has flown so high so quickly and then just come down and disappeared so quickly. It's amazing when you look back in that mid '80s to mid '90s period.
Yeah.
The real estate that video stores took up, and the investment in hardware and software that went on through that whole period by both the industry and the consumer. It's a fascinating. I run a couple of. I'm administrator on a couple of Facebook pages that look specifically at and try to bring people together exactly from that period. Because I went through, from being working for Village Roadshow, I then went to CBS Fox, which was the VHS arm of 20th Century Fox, and went through like a whole period of sales and marketing within the industry. And it was such a unique working environment and working experience that people who left the home video biz found it very hard to get jobs anywhere else, even in associated industries. Like video reps wouldn't get hired for record companies or record industry, because reps in the video business could literally walk in, and it wasn't a case of, would you like to buy one of those? The role of the video rep was to go in there and say, okay, I've got you down for 30. Why don't you make it 50 copies of that? It would, like, there was so much money and so much sort of investment going on. It was an extraordinary time.
Yeah, yeah, I imagine. It's, I mean, with my kind of interest in the career and the film space, like as I was going through that journey last year, doing my video production business, which still exists. I haven't put a bullet in it, so Engagineer, it's called. It's still floating out there. I believe the website's still live. And I'm actually, after all this learning I've gone through with the live streaming carry on, and how many pitfalls there are to find. I have now decided that I'm going to actually start advertising that I can help people with their live streaming, say, for corporations or individuals or whoever, but because
Sure.
it is a you've maybe remotely hosting stuff for people and just kind of adding a little bit more pizzazz to the whole thing. I know how to do some basic animation, motion graphics sort of stuff in After Effects, and I've also learnt to just go and buy pre-made stuff as well. I ended up making this intro thing that I've got going on here, and the artwork, the poster itself, which hopefully I don't get sued for or copyright struck or anything. I just went and found like 178 different movies that I either just enjoyed, like lots of it's 80s, because that was when I was kind of growing up really, and getting into watching movies, going to the video store, it's probably, it took a long time to build that artwork, is what I'm going to say. And
I bet,
the template, I couldn't find anything that would accommodate all those images. There was some photo montage-y things and what have you. So I was like, nah, stuff it. I'll just like try to figure out. Hadn't used After Effects for a while, so I had to basically go back and relearn how to use the virtual camera in there and fly.
There's some great titles in amongst it, and I got to say, I'm trying to figure out what the one down here. They're shooting something. Is that? They're on the back of the truck,
that is it's Back to the Future 3, and if you look closely, that's the DeLorean down the bottom left with
miniatures.
The steam train behind it. It's on fire.
It's amazing. It's a great collection of images, mate, and it brings back a lot of like golden memories from the period. Stuff like Uncle Buck and Highlander, and that was all. That was all my scene. So you're right. For me, movies have always been the, and I was fortunate. I went through a period where. I started to discover the great films of the 70s. Some of my favorite movies are All the President's Men. It's from the 60s, but I'd say Bonnie and Clyde as well. Those sort of movies, which were at the last great era of studio movie making, when they had important things to say, and the studios weren't afraid to make things like All the President's Men and The Parallax View, and that sort of came to a bit of a stop with Warren Beatty's Reds, which is one of my favorite movies. So look, that was all just a hugely fascinating learning curve that I went through with movies and television, to a certain extent. Television, I get a lot of, in my role as the festival director of the Science Fiction Film Festival, I get people who are, they're Doctor Who this or they're Blake Seven that, and I'm not right over all of that as much as I probably should be, but certainly the great flights of fantasy that cinema offered would still sort of impact me when I watch them now.
Yeah. So I think it's a good opportunity to segue into what I kind of put as the title for this video. And you probably would have noticed I plagiarized a couple of your words with the dank, dark cinemas, but the joy of, I guess, like art house cinema. And I was just thinking about this the other day, actually, and I was fortunate enough, I can't remember the name of the place now, but I was fortunate enough to go down to Melbourne a few times when my sister was living down there, and they had a really awesome art house cinema, and they had like this really cool poster that showed all the different screenings, and they would do like a double feature for like $10 or something. It was like really cheap, and it was just a lot of fun. It had a lot of character. As you say, probably not a very fancy establishment, but like you were there to see the movie, you were there to kind of socialise with everybody in the intermission period, and it was just a good night.
That's some of the great memories I have of going to the movies here in Sydney. We had the Mandolin in the middle of the city there. We had the Valhalla Cinema out at Glebe, and they had one of those sort of calendar posters as well with a whole year's worth of films on either side of it. And so, you used to collect those, and I used to go through this. When I was in high school, I guess, as a young boy, I would cut the program guides out of the Sunday newspapers, and while other kids were collecting, like cutting out footy players and making scrapbooks out of that stuff, I was using the program guides, the Hoyts and the Greater Union and Village Roadshow program guides, and making scrapbooks and making little magazines. And I did that for 6 years, and it used to drive my parents mad because I'd get the Sunday papers before they'd even read it, and they'd be flicking through and they'd get to the entertainment section and it'd be all cut to shreds by me chopping pages. But that's really helped my sort of I don't want to say encyclopedic knowledge of film, because a lot of people out there smarter than me, but the stuff that I can just pull out from the depths of my mind that came from that period when I just soaked up as much information as I could about cinema and about movies is, that was the great movie going period. You'd get on a train at 8:30 in the morning and you'd see 11, 1:30, 3:30, 5 o'clock session, do 4 movies in a day, come home and just your eyes were spinning. So yeah, they were great memories.
Yeah, that's awesome. I grew up in the country, and as I think I mentioned, and like little teeny towns, like places where there was maybe 5 houses, and so like the nearest place to go that had a cinema was probably at least an hour away. So whenever we would go, it just added that extra excitement, because you might go see a movie at the cinema at that age, like when I was 9, 10 or whatever. You might only see a movie in the cinema once or twice in the year. So yeah, for me, going and seeing the Neverending Story, that was one of my all-time favorites. It's actually behind here. But if you look closely when in the titles, it's one of the main features. Actually, at the end, I kind of squeezed it in there as well, or half of it. So I just thought, again, I was thinking about copyright restrictions. I was thinking, what? I just chop off half the poster.
They won't come after you.
Say modified for like good purposes, but it's all for the love of the films anyway. So hopefully, they see it more as free advertising as opposed to like copyright infringement. And
the Neverending Story is one of those great memories, and people my age and a bit younger your age, they clearly remember the death of the horse. Spoiler alert, everyone! But yeah, the horse doesn't do well. It's one of the great sort of gut churning, like Bambi's mother moments for our generation. So it's that still is a great film for the whole family.
Yeah, 100%. That's something I've been loving really with my daughter over the last couple of years. Last year. Yeah, maybe a touch more. I kind of felt like she was old enough that we could start I could watch Star Wars with her and the Neverending Story, and we could start watching some of those different films. And at the moment, are actually, would you believe, well, you probably would because you're a parent. I didn't get to see the final Star Wars at the cinema, which was a travesty. And then I have not seen it since. So don't talk about anything to do with what happens there. But so I'm trying to make my way through the other films with her. Oh my God, we are in the middle of the first one now, and I have to relive the horror of Jar Jar Binks. I'm sitting there, and she thinks he's quite entertaining, and then she's looking across at me, and I'm kind of got this face of disgust. She's like, he's funny. Yeah. I'm like,
Didn't cut it for us old school Star Wars fans, and I had nothing against some of the the alien creations, and you think of some of the great stuff they did. I must say, in the original Star Wars, which has been renamed A New Hope in recent years, I've watched it recently, and it is starting to look a little bit like a 70s film, not in the special effects and not in the because it still looks fantastic, or to my eyes anyway, but just in the storytelling. After that big opening sequence, there is a long passage where it's kind of talky, and they go down to to Tatooine, and you're thinking, studios wouldn't make this movie nowadays. So nothing happens for about 35 minutes at the start there. Steven Spielberg has said the same thing about Jaws. He said it wouldn't get made today because after the attack at the start of the film, it's kind of talky for about 40 minutes and nothing really happens. So, audiences expect more of a jolt nowadays. But, when Jaws came out, that was one of the movies. I didn't see that at the cinemas. I actually saw that at a retro screening sometime after, but Jaws, Star Wars, Close Encounters, Raiders of the Lost Ark, all those films that people of my generation always sort of throw up as the influential moments. They played such a huge role in not just watching and enjoying, but films becoming an obsession, like going back to them over and over again. And then just as I hit high school, that's when the VHS went crazy. So all of a sudden I'm just locking myself away in the TV room for a whole weekend and just watching and soaking it up. So it was
Yeah.
an incredible time to be a young person and someone in love with films.